Hi guys, today I'll be looking at this, the Roccat Vulcan TKL Pro with Roccat Titan Optical linear switches. Let's get started. Now this keyboard was released in 2020 alongside the non-pro version which I already reviewed in case you're interested. Now somewhat replacing this keyboard is the Vulcan 2 TKL Pro which have adjustable Hall effect switches and a price tag of £112 on Amazon at the time of this video. Pricing wise, this keyboard retails for £150 on Amazon and is 40% off at the time of this video. Now moving on to the switches, these are the Roccat Titan Optical Linear and they look suspiciously similar to the non-optical variant. However, they are different and you'll see what I mean when I show you the force curves. Now let's move on to the keyboard characteristics. Now the base is made of plastic and the top is made of aluminium, so in other words, this is very standard. In terms of dimensions, the keyboard is roughly 36cm long, 13cm wide and 4cm tall with the feet extended. It also weighs just under 700 grams with the cable. Now moving on to the keycaps, they are very thin and laser ablated. This is a cheap manufacturing method, but it's not great for any kind of longevity. Now Roccat finally gave us a braided removable cable. It's a shame it took this long, but I guess it's better late than never. Overall, apart from the keycaps, it's a solid keyboard, and since the switches uses the MX mount, you can put whatever keycaps you want on them. 8 out of 10. Now just like the non-Pro, this one also has easy shift. However, despite this being the Pro, it isn't compatible with Swarm 2. So you can't take advantage of newer features like game mode and FN mode, which by the way was compatible with the non-Pro. And yes, that means you're stuck using Swarm 1, and I'm not really sure why Roccat couldn't get this to work with Swarm 2. I mean, it's the Pro version, it should. Also, just like the non-Pro, this keyboard also has onboard memory, but guess what? Any changes I make in the software doesn't get saved on the keyboard, so that's something they've never been able to figure out. However, this keyboard comes with very smooth and very reliable optical switches, which is its biggest feature compared to the non-Pro. So what about any other features? Well, it has media shortcuts on the F keys, a volume knob and RGB lights that dim after a few minutes of inactivity. Overall, apart from the removable braided cable and the optical switches, it's quite similar to the non-Pro. 8 out of 10. Now the RGB on this black model looks good, it's practically the same as the non-Pro. Additionally, the Pro version also features the same lock light implementation where the caps lock and scroll lock light up white, as you can see. However, the stabilizers are still quite rattly, take a listen. Overall, apart from it not being supported on Swarm 2, which isn't a huge loss anyway, this is basically the same as the non-Pro. 7 out of 10. Now this keyboard uses optical switches and Roccat claims it has a 100 million keystroke life cycle as opposed to the 50 million for its traditional switches. However, the same problems remain. The RGB LEDs and the keycaps will need replacement at some point down the line. I should also mention this goes for the cable as well, but it is braided now so it should last longer. Overall, these should be very reliable keyboards given its characteristics. 9 out of 10. Now, £150 is a lot of money for this keyboard and I can tell you it isn't worth it. So what are the alternatives? Well, the Keychron K8 wireless is one I can recommend. They go for around £100. They feature a TKL layout, Hotswap Gateron optical switches and are wireless. Also, just like this keyboard, it isn't QMK compatible. However, even on sale, this keyboard goes for £90, which is technically cheaper. But that's when it's on sale, which isn't a guarantee. Overall, there aren't too many alternatives out there, but they do exist if you're willing to look around. 1 out of 10. Now let's move on to the switch characteristics. On-center key presses are ultra smooth with very minor inconsistencies at very slow key presses. Off-center key presses are also very smooth with minor inconsistencies at very slow key presses. Overall, these are smoother compared to its predecessor, but not significantly so. It really goes to show how good we've been able to make traditional switches. Although optical switches are still quite new, so there's always room for improvement. 9 out of 10. Now, according to Roccat, these switches have an actuation force of 1.4mm and a total travel of 3.6mm. Now, as you can see from this force curve I recorded, the Rock and Titan Optical Linear were within its outline specs. They were also very consistent, with neither of the three switches showing major deviations from one another, although switch 3 was slightly heavier compared to the other two. Now here's a force curve showing the comparison between the optical linear and the non-optical Titan linear. The optical switch is noticeably lighter, but they feel very similar in practice. Now here it is against the Gatron yellow, which further shows this is lighter than the non-optical switch, but this is probably what most gamers are used to. Overall, this is a very consistent, high actuating, shorter travel, medium weighted switch. Personally, it's not for me though. 6 out of 10. Now, just like its predecessor, the sound suffers from cheap keycaps and rattly stabilizers. Also, the ping has returned, but it isn't super noticeable. Overall, sound was again not a top priority when Roccat was designing this keyboard. 4 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, just like its predecessor, these were also very smooth and very consistent, so they were pleasant to type on, although I still made a lot of typos given their high actuation point. Overall, Roccat once again did a really good job with these, but they're designed for gaming and not typing. 6 out of 10. So, are there actually any differences between this and its predecessor? Well, not that I could feel. Although I have to again mention that I'm not an esports gamer, so I probably couldn't take advantage of any benefits the Switch had to offer. In fact, the high actuation point was again more of a hindrance since I kept pressing keys by accident, which was really annoying. Overall, even with those annoyances, I liked gaming on these switches. They were predictable and they weren't too light, plus I could see this being used by some competitive gamers. 7 out of 10. In conclusion, the only special thing about this keyboard are the optical switches, but they aren't worth the price in my opinion. The final score for this keyboard is 33 out of 50 or 66%, ranking it 3rd out of the 10 keyboards I've looked at. The final score for this switch is 32 out of 50 or 64%, which again is rather decent for a linear switch. And that's it. Next time I'll be showing you a vintage keyboard maybe. Until then, take care and goodbye.